Our final speaker is Alex Dent from ANGLOGOLD ASHANTI. Alex is going to speak on environmental and community considerations in Greenfields Exploration. Alex is responsible for both internal and external environmental compliance and management systems across the Greenfields Exploration projects in WA and Queensland and New South Wales. Environmental management throughout a project lifecycle includes early desktop assessments, risk management, environmental and heritage on-ground surveys, regulatory approvals, subsequent rehabilitation, and the list goes on. So without further ado, Alex, well, please welcome Alex.
Okay, I know you guys are dying for drinks and nibbles, but you're going to have to listen this out. I'm going to do a bit of a talk on environmental and community considerations. So I've been doing this work, particularly in Greenfields Exploration, for the last 15 years with ANGLOGOLD ASHANTI. I'm going to draw my experiences from Western Australia and also in Queensland. So those are the areas that I've worked in, and particularly in gold. So I don't know, some of you may work for big mining companies who have got people like me that can do all the environmental work for you, or you might have land access people who can do your work. Or some of you might be going off and working for a junior company, and you might find that you're going to have to do some of this work yourself before you go on ground. So I'm going to take you on a journey through an exploration project. So why? What are we talking about? What's this about? It's all about your social environmental license to operate. Okay, and why is it important? Because it's your company's reputation. It's also the reputation of the industry to do the right thing out there in relation to stakeholder engagement and environment. And it's also really important for the success of your project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider these environmental and community aspects throughout the exploration project, right from the beginning and also to the end. So you have a lot of planning to do up front, but you also need to make sure you can do it at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump forward, and you guys have gone out and done some gold exploration, and you're really happy, you're fantastic, the company's happy, you know, the boss is happy, you've got your mine, you want to go to mine, but then you want to go, okay, maybe we need to go and talk to our stakeholders, maybe we need to go and do some stuff. And then you suddenly find that the community is not very happy with you. Something's gone a bit wrong, okay? Oh, okay, sorry. And the community is not happy with you because you haven't actually done the engagement. And believe you me, this does happen. It happens quite regularly that suddenly the community doesn't want you there. Maybe you've gone off and done some environmental non-compliances. Maybe you did a bit of overclearing. Maybe you knocked out a couple of species. And the regulators aren't happy with you. All right, again, this is company reputation. And again, maybe you've got some fines and you're in the little black book of the regulators. Not a good place to be. So what I'm going to do is take you on a journey right from tenement acquisition all the way down to rehabilitation and closing the door. Now, certainly with gold exploration, there's a 99% chance that we will go ahead and do rehabilitation and then closing the door. Oops, I'm back again. Sorry about that. So I'm not going to go into great detail about tenement acquisition, but as you all know, you do need to have a license, an exploration license, in order to go out and do the work that you need to do. In Western Australia, you have an E39, depending on your district, exploration tenement, and in Queensland, it's known as an exploration permit mineral. Right, so you go off and get your application. I think this is great, off we go. And then suddenly somebody's going to object. It could be native title, it could be landholders, it could be the neighbours. So somebody might not like you being there. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to look what the issue is. The objections are resolved by negotiating an agreement with those particular parties. Probably a key one that is going to probably object to your exploration tenement is under the Native Title Act. Okay, that's a federal act, and this is where if there are native title claims and native title determinations over your tenement, there's a good chance that they will object. If they're organised, this is a map you can see. This has come off the Native Title Vision. This is federal map, and you can see over across of Australia now how many native title claims and determinations there are. And as you can see, quite a lot of applications now. The process is the same for native title claims and determinations. So what is it? The native title is the recognition that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have rights and interests to land and waters according to their traditional law and customs as set out in Australian law. So the process is that when you have put your application in, the regulatory department or the mines department will send out what's called a Section 29 notice to the native title holders. They have about, I'm not quite sure, I think it's 3 to 4 months to respond. And if they do object, some do object and some don't. Depends on how organised they are. They might have a prescribed body corporate or land council, and they might be got a lot of lawyers. So they're likely to object. And then they go into what's called a right to negotiate. And at this point, you then have to go into a heritage agreement. I would suggest somebody who's got experience to do that. That can take a considerable amount of time. From experience, we've had anything from 4 to 12 months before we've got that agreement together. Lots and lots of meetings, lots and lots of listening, lots and lots of talking. And yeah, lawyers, lots of lawyers. And it's administered by the Native Title Tribunal. So if things stall a little bit in your agreement, they will try and push it all along. So you've got your agreement with the native title holders. Always follow through with those commitments. Read what you've committed to in that agreement. It's really important. You can't just like put it somewhere and forget about it. You need to engage with your native title holders right from the beginning of your exploration project right the way through to the end. Build up that trust. You often go to these meetings and they don't trust you. They don't want to know you. They don't want to know what you're there. But you need to build that trust. And I could, maybe suggest to go and do an early ground survey on the ground, and then just sit under the tree, listen to them, listen to what they need, listen to what they want. It's really important to build that engagement and that trust up and that relationship, because it could last for a very long time. If you find a mine, they're going to be there for a long time. So it's really important to get this piece done up front. The other thing I'd suggest to do is when you have applied for your tenement, I'd go and have a look on some spatial data, make sure you haven't put it over Class A nature reserve. Trying to get into Kakadu these days, not going to happen, I don't think. But no doesn't mean no. It does say in most of the conditions that you can't go into Class A nature reserve, but you need an awful lot of money, an awful lot of lobbying, and an awful lot of time. So I would suggest leave them alone. Okay, so in the case of Queensland, you might need to go and get yourself a permit, an environmental permit, and then as an environmental authority. That actually doesn't give you the right to go and do any clearing, but what it does, it's usually quite automatic because it's a standard environmental authority, and it's 40 pages of conditions of how you need to operate. So I'd probably suggest to say a compliance register to work out what you can and can't do. So in Western Australia, as you know, when you get your tenement granted, you will then go and get a set of conditions. So if you go to Mineral Titles online, that'll give you your conditions of how to operate. So you really do need to make sure before you even start, just make sure you know your tenement conditions. Okay, the next thing I'd suggest to do is to do an environmental desktop assessment. Is to gather all spatial data. You can get it from quite a lot of areas online, Queensland Spatial Catalogue online, and also SLIP in WA. So gather all your environmental information, find out where your environmentally sensitive areas are, collect information on your threatened species, and build up a GIS environmental workspace, whether it's MapInfo or whether it's ArcGIS. Build up a big workspace, which would be your environmental and heritage risk workspace, and then you can plan your holes against that. Make sure you don't go like drilling in a heritage site or something like that. It's not a good idea. This is a classic workspace we have in Queensland, and it's quite mind-boggling to work out what's what you can and can't do. Like the purple area is an endangered regional ecosystem. This is a state forest, the light green. You've got flora trigger survey areas. You've got matters of state environmental significance. And every single one of those has some maybe additional approval. You might need to go and get approval from the Department of Agriculture. Yeah, lots of conditions to consider. So in Queensland, it's quite good because you can go online and can go and get a report, and they can send you a map. You can put your EPM number, your license number in, and then they can send you a map, and then you can check that against your own data. So here you can particularly see you've got your environmentally sensitive areas, you've got your category A, you've got your category B and your category C. You go back to the conditions and have a look to see, where you can go, what you can do. Always a good idea to do a federal EPBC matters report to see if you've got any matters of national environmental significance. Hopefully you're not in a heritage site, and hopefully you're not in a Ramsar wetland, but you will be able to build up some of the species that might be in your area that you need to consider and you need to protect. Always a good idea to find out what your species are. This is a classic one in Queensland. As you can see, there's the koala up there. Nowadays, you look at a koala the wrong way, you're in trouble. So I'm not going to go into the whole EPBC referrals, but it is a possibility that you might have to refer your exploration project, especially when you do ground disturbance under the EPBC Act, the federal government. And then you need to go and get your heritage sites. That's really important. You need to know where your heritage sites are. So again, you can get that online and make sure you put that into your workspace. And you also got to consider that perhaps you need a 100-meter buffer around that particular heritage site. So important again to go back to your conditions and find out what you have to do. But really important not to go into any of these areas. Government guidelines, there's lots of them. They're all out there. Make sure if you do get any guidelines, just go online and get the latest one, because often there's a lot of different versions of different guidelines. But yeah, read them all and see what you need to be able to do. So in Western Australia, if you want to go out and do some ground disturbance, you go out and get what's called a program of works. You actually go online. It's all done online these days. It's useful. You can bring up your tenement, and then you can put in for each of your tenements what you want. You don't actually have to provide them with your hole locations or your tracks anymore. You just be able to do it per tenement. So here you've probably got maybe 400 air core holes. You might have 75 RC holes, diamond holes. Always keep that document with you. So when you do go out and go and clear, you make sure you stay within that approval amount. And it's always good to check afterwards and make sure you haven't gone over. For the case of in Queensland, give you an example here. In WA, you don't have to get a bond. You don't have to pay any money. That's because there's the MRF, the Mine Site Rehabilitation Fund, which is a levy which mining companies have to pay each year. But in Queensland, it does mean money. You have to go and get yourself an estimated rehabilitation cost. That's basically an assessment as how much it's going to cost for the regulators to do your rehabilitation if you walk away and don't do anything. So it is a bond that you can get back as long as you've done your rehabilitation well. Generally, up to 10 hectares of clearing, it's around about $40,000, depending if it's low risk or high risk. If you are going to be drilling halfway up a mountain, that's pretty high risk because you've obviously got to consider erosion control and also in an environmentally sensitive area. Now, I'd really suggest, if you're not sure about getting all your approvals done, you might want to do this before or after you've done your approvals, but I'd suggest to go and visit the regulators. I do it every year to go and visit them. You don't go into the regulators and ask, what do I do? You actually go into them and ask, and actually have all your information with you, have everything on the table, do all your homework, and going, this is how we're going to operate, this is how we're going to manage, that's okay, isn't it? And they're really helpful. That's what they're there for. Always remember that the regulators, the Department of Environment and Science or the Mines Department or the DBCA are all there to service you. So don't ever hesitate to go into the office and go and talk to them. And then you can be more confident that you got it right. Maps on the table, and always follow up any regulator meetings with an email, which just gives you a summary of your discussion. So they may not respond, but if they don't respond, well, that means, yeah, they're happy with your discussion. So you can always just file that away if you need it later. Okay, so this is quite a new emerging area going on at the moment, and this is coexisting land use. And I don't know, a lot of you maybe have worked on pastoral stations, maybe on Crown land, but now we've got this, what they call diversification leases in Western Australia, which there's going to be these other land uses, and particularly when it comes to renewable energies. Solar panels, solar farms, wind farms, conservation habitat restoration areas. There's now biodiversity offset areas, and now we're getting to carbon offset areas as well. So carbon farming, soil carbon farming, human-induced regeneration areas, who are getting their ACCUs. So it's all getting quite busy out there. We've had some very recently experience in Queensland and found that there's a second great wind turbine farm being proposed right over one of our high target areas. So I went off to go and look at the guidelines. Okay, so there must be some guidelines. Who talks to who? Nothing, no guidelines at all. Nobody's talking to anybody. The department of development, I think, who does the wind farms, oversees the wind farms approvals, and the mines department of resources literally don't talk to each other. Nobody's talking to each other. Everybody's forgotten. So we are now in a bit of a sticky situation. We have started to talk to the renewable energy people. So it's a new emerging thing, but nobody's really actually talking about it much. So the next one, as part of your stakeholder engagement, is your landholders. Some of you might be lucky doing exploration just on one big pastoral station, or you might be doing a number on lots of different pastoral stations. So it's really important you engage with your landholders. It's a really key thing to do. Yeah, if that's on the gate, I'd probably suggest you'd ring first. Okay, so early engagement, go and see your stake, go and see your landholders, the pastoralists. Go and talk to them, just let them know, let it sink in. Sometimes they're not really happy you being there. You know, we've had a few who got to the gate and told us whether we could go and stick it. But, you know, trying to build up a good relationship with your stakeholders. In Queensland particularly, you have to provide an entry notice. You have to give them information of what you want to do. Generally, in an entry notice, it's doing that early stage exploration. So you're going to be going to do some soil sampling, bit of mapping. But again, always build up that relationship and always meet the commitments. So if they say, please don't come in when we're mustering, please don't go in when you're mustering, wait for them to stop mustering and then go in. Okay, so ground disturbing activities. If you're now going to want to go and put a drill rig on their property, you might need to go and do a conduct and compensation agreement. Right, that's for compensating for the amount of disturbance you've done. And that could potentially be for a long legal process. Quite often that does happen for a long time. Don't go to head on with the bull with the station owners. This is much the nicest way to go. Visit them regularly, again, build up a good relationship. So if, like us, we have a lot of landholders we have to deal with, what we do is we put it in actually into a record, like a diary. So we have a diary for each landholder. So it gives all the details of how to contact them, what their names are, and also what's potentially on that land use, on land management use. So this one has a carbon farming on it. It's got biosecurity management plan. That would mean they might require, and whatever their requirements are. So you've got certified washdowns. You've got, maybe they want you to call 1 week before you get onto the property. Do not enter the property in high rainfall, for instance. So I always make sure that our geologists read this before they go on ground to make sure that they have, and they're going to meet their commitments. And you do wrong things when they're not really happy with you being there, they're going to come down and you've ruined that relationship already, and for the next explorers who come along. That's actually done through what's called Survey 123, which is an Esri system, which actually you can then connect to ArcGIS. So we actually even do a traffic light system with our landholders. So red means no, they don't want you there, they don't like you. Yellow is like, yeah, well, if you have to come on, and then you might get some landholders who actually would love you being there. Come on in, buy my farm while you're at it. So it's really good to make sure you record all those interactions. So the next thing is community engagement. All right, so maybe you're starting to do some exploration just near a town, small town site. You might be staying in the town, you might be staying in the local pub, maybe staying in the local hotel. Good idea to go down talking to some of the community. You know, go to the local shop, tell them who you are, introduce yourselves, get a little bit of an idea if they want you there or not. We find that most of the time they do, because they say, oh, goody, this is employment opportunities. When are you going to build your mine? So we have to try and manage those expectations that, you know, we're just here exploring. Chances are we probably won't find anything. But in that time, you know, try and employ a couple of the local people. If you need a geotech to come and mark up some core or go and pick up some samples, you know, engage with a couple of the locals. If you can, support the local businesses, you know, support the footy team's jumpers. something not too expensive. The Pony Club, perhaps, or something like that. But endear yourself to the community. And always, manage their expectations. So tell them you're going to build a mine. And this is a great place to find the locals, and a great place to go and have a little bit of community engagement after work. That's actually up at Cape York. Not everybody arrives at the pub by car in that area. So yeah, good place. Always engage what's going on in the community in the pub. Just a bit about management system. Obviously, you do need a good management system. Most management systems is based on plan, do, check, act. So you plan your work. That's really important. You plan it really carefully. You then do the work, and then you go and check. Did you check it? Did you do it properly? Did you do any overclearing? Did you go and check? Did you knock any species out? Always check what you did. And, you know, there's always room for improvement. We use Survey 123. As I said before, this is actually really good. We actually can go in and put in reports. This is for health, safety, environment, and community. We can do our camp management there. We do all our pre-starts, our JMPs, and then we can do environmental reports and community reports. And that's really good. That all comes back spatially as well at the other end. And also where you put all your permits, all your approvals, all your PAWs, not on your desktop, to leave it there for nobody will ever be able to see and find again. Make sure you put it into a central database. We use a thing called Land Tracker, and that's actually all our tenement management, as well as environment and all our agreements. So all our entry notices, all our conduct and compensation agreements all go into that one area, and our heritage agreements. So everybody can find them. Okay, risk assessments. I'm sure you know all about risk assessments. I know most of you do, but it is a really important part of how you need to plan your work. Before you get out there, I've often seen some of the risk assessments, and they've considered health, safety, but nothing about environmental community. So you need to cover all four in your risk assessments. So of course, you need to look at your activities, what your aspects are, your hazards, you know, your land clearing, knocking out threatened species, going into environmentally sensitive areas. What are the consequences? What adverse impacts going to happen, and what consequences? Then you do your risk assessment, your risk matrix, because then you can work out which are the most significant risks that you have. At the end of that, you have then your set of controls. If you haven't got the controls and you want some more, and you're going to put some more controls in, always have some actions, and always follow up at those actions and make sure they actually do happen. So just within your team, it's a really good idea to do a bit of environments and community education, a bit of training. Really good to have a good induction, especially when you've got your drillers coming on board, your contractors. Make sure you've got a nice, good environmental community induction, so they need to know how to operate. I do regular toolbox talks, maybe on threatened species, maybe on a few things. And then we always start, oh, should we have a safety share? Let's do a safety share. We could call it a value share, because you could actually share environment and community as well as safety shares in the mornings. And I always encourage guys to do environmental initiatives, so ESG projects, anything where we can improve in our environmental best practices. This is a fairly obvious one, but it does get forgotten. Washdown. Make sure if you're going to go on somebody's property, make sure you don't turn up with a dirty vehicle. They might not be happy with you. There's some pretty nasty weeds out there. And there's, again, particularly in Queensland. So there's some pretty nasty ones that they don't want introduced onto the property. And again, if you have introduced weeds onto somebody's property, you know, you're going to be on the back foot. We always record all our washdowns. That again goes into one of those Survey 123 reports. And also you might find that they've got a biosecurity plan. And they also might need a certified washdown. So you need to provide that before you go in. So it's really important that you keep a record of your washdowns. Okay, we've done all that now. I've been probably talking for 20, 25 minutes. We haven't got on the ground yet. That's because that's the plan. It's always a lot of planning to do before you can go out there and kick some rocks. So first of all, probably what you might be doing is just a bit of that early stage exploration. All right, get on the ground. I always still provide them with a digital field map, which has all those environmental and heritage layers on it, which they can look at live, so they can know where they all are at any time they go out there. Might go off and do a bit of soil sampling. Most of the time that's not considered ground disturbance, but if you do need to start putting in tracks to get to the areas, then that is ground disturbance, and you need to make sure you've got approvals for that. Okay, so we got to drilling at last. Got the drill rig out there. Again, you're going to do follow-up risk assessments at every stage of the project. And I'd suggest you then go out and do an on-ground environmental and heritage survey. This is when the traditional owners need to come in about before you're going to do any on-ground disturbance, and then you're going to put a good work program out. So I do most of the environmental surveys, and we try and do it with the stakeholders. So great fun out there. You learn a lot. You go and you listen. What's important to them? What's the bush tucker out there? What are the important trees? They might carriage-on trees, particularly, are really important. Yep, we'll avoid those. We won't hit the carriage-on trees. So it's a lot of fun. You learn a lot of stuff with these guys, and it's well worth doing. And make sure that when you have done all your environmental surveys and you've gone out there, make sure that you've got a work program, and that work program is all your health, safety, environment, community requirements for that particular drill program. And we always have a process that nobody's to go out clearing until they've got that one of those work programs have been released. Right, let's go. Get out there and go and start drilling. And check the weather. It's a good idea. Under those conditions. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about clearing principles. So you're getting out there, and now you want to go and clear, and you want to get on ground. All right? Only ever clear when you've got approval to do so. Only ever when you make sure you've got that approval in your hand. Minimal impact to the environment. You don't need to go in there with a bulldozer. You don't need to go in there and do bucket touch and charge away and make a highway through that bush. It's really not necessary. This is one of the tracks that we have. I said, no, we don't need to. Depends on the ground. Obviously, sometimes you do. If there's a lot of woody vegetation on the ground, you might need to go in and do bucket touch or raised blade, but sometimes you just need to go in and drive over. Rehab is better at the end of it if you only do drive over. It's much easier. And avoid mature trees. You know, sometimes when I go out and do the environmental survey and one of you geos has gone and tried to put a hole right over a massive big 80, 100-year-old habitat tree, and you can see the owls nested in there. I'd say, no, we can move it. You can move it over there, and you can just change the azimuth. Not much point, because the chance of having gold at the bottom of there is pretty small. We'd rather keep the tree. So we can alter our hole locations and then change the azimuth if required. Don't pass vegetation, soil against trees. It's really bad for the trees, and it's very hard to rehab. So if you are overseeing this clearing, you might be using a local contractor. Just make sure they understand the principles of clearing. Particularly in Queensland, for instance, and here is clearing through a creek. They actually do have regulations of where you can and can't clear through a creek. And also, you're always best to go in and then push the soil out of the creek. So don't compromise the creek by putting a big windrow in there and a load of sediment. That can cause some problems further down. Always track your disturbance. You know where you've disturbed. You need to track it. You need to put it into your GIS system. So you need to know where you go back and rehab. There have been a lot of cases, especially when you've been audited by the department. I don't know if anybody's been audited by the department in this state, DEMOs. They've been going around auditing a lot of people in exploration recently, and some people didn't even know where their tracks were. They had no idea, didn't even know where the POW was, let alone do the rehabilitation. So you need to make sure you have the process that you have recorded all your disturbance. And then go back to your approvals, have a look, make sure that you're compliant. Droning is a good one now. We do a lot more droning before, during, and after. It actually is really good to be able to see, you know, you've applied for a pad size, make sure they haven't gone overboard. And then you can also follow the rehabilitation afterwards. Okay, I'm going to talk a bit about environmental etiquette on the rig. So I'm sure most of you know about this, being on the rig, and new geos are getting on the rig, but be surprised what doesn't happen. Sumps, just make sure you don't let the sumps all overflow, especially in WA, where it's very hypersaline water. Always say, stop what you're doing, stop the rig, go and get somebody, go and dig another sump. It is totally non-compliant to allow water just to flow out of the sumps. Hydrocarbon management. Make sure that when you do a rig audit, that these guys do have a good spill kit. Make sure that these also the drillers and the drillers offsiders are aware that they need to clean up any spills that they have or report any spills. No, they're not to just leave them on the ground and walk away. They need to be able to make sure, you need to make sure they recover all their hydrocarbons. And when you've got a laydown or a launch point, make sure everything is bunded. Just go in, make sure those 44-gallon drums or whatever fuel you've got, bunded, less likely to have a fuel spill. And also, when you have put a track in to do the drilling, don't let everybody just drive willy-nilly all over the environment. It's not good. Just make sure, just tell everybody to stick to the tracks. Doesn't sound much, but I tell you, I've been out there a few times to go and check, and it's amazing what doesn't get done. And this is one of my biggest hates in the world, and that's open holes. Really, it's so preventable for the loss of wildlife. There's a huge amount of wildlife, and there's a huge amount of been lost throughout the years in WA, everywhere, for people leaving air core holes open. I think it was the mines department or one of the departments a few years ago actually sucked out at the bottom of an air core hole, and there was at least 200 different skeletons at the bottom of that hole. So it's a really unnecessary loss of biodiversity, and I get really upset and really grumpy when I see people who leave them open. So if you do see one open, even if it's not yours, even if it was the previous explorers, it's always a good idea to take some plugs with you, and please just bury it over. All right, make sure it's manded on top so it doesn't cause any erosion, and just carry some of these with you. It's really good to just a good best practice. So you've done your drilling program, and you haven't found anything. You're going to go and do some rehabilitation. And again, this needs to be a good standard of rehabilitation. You know, make sure you do it well. All your air core spores are buried. If you don't take them off site already, make sure you can bury them in situ, scarify over it. Put the vegetation back again. RC diamond pads, make sure you do some nice scarification, get all the vegetation back. Do it well, do it nicely. Block off the tracks at the end, make sure nobody uses them again, and also at your camps and laydowns. Always record, take lots and lots and lots of photographs of all that rehab, because you will be needing to report it in your annual reports to the department. Particularly in Queensland, they expect you to do rehabilitation monitoring, especially if you've been drilling in right up halfway up hills and mountains. You need to go back every year to make sure that there's no erosion control and revegetation is going well. So that is a requirement. Not such a requirement in Western Australia, but certainly it is in Queensland. So you actually might find something in your drill program, and you might want to go off and do some follow-up drilling. You might want to do a second stage, a phase 2, a little bit of infill drilling. So you do need to should be able to rehabilitate within 6 months. That's the general guidelines. I think DEMERS have actually extended it to 12 months now, quite recently. But generally, it's either 6 to 12 months where you actually have to go compliance to go back and do your rehab. But you can just go and ask for extension. Just go and ask the department, send a report. Please, can I have my tracks open for another year or so, because I want to go and do some follow-up drilling. And they'll always say yes, as long as you ask them. Always make sure you do your annual environmental reports. Depending on which state you're in, what you have to do, but most of the time you do. You have to provide them with your clearing information, or your rehabilitation photographs, maybe some follow-up monitoring, your revegetation success. Keep those regulators informed. You get all that done right, and they'll come and audit you, and you've done everything right, you should be okay. Okay, this is the one that a lot of people don't do very well, is you haven't found any mineral resources. There's a fair chance that you won't. You then need to close the door. And closing that door is something that a lot of people don't do very well. They just leave the area. They don't say goodbye. So mainly is make sure you've completed all your regulatory reporting. If you're leaving a community, go and say goodbye, have a drink with them in the pub, say, sorry guys, we're out of here. And also with your stakeholder, with your native title holders, your traditional owners, it's a really good idea to say, thanks guys. You know, and maintain that company reputation, because another exploration company might be coming along and after you and see if they can find the gold that you didn't find. And so it is industry reputation. We've been in long places and people have done the wrong thing before us, and it's very hard for us to then go and explore. So exploration for gold, the chances of finding is 0.0% of any projects being able to go go to mine. But if you happen to find a gold mine, if you happen to find mineral resources, and you've done all that environmental and social license to operate, well, you're going to have a smoother ride towards your mining approvals.